I'm Shoestring Jane. Welcome back to my channel where I talk about all things thrifty, frugal and money saving. And I'm revisiting an old topic again today. I thought it was worth having another look at it. And that's the subject of saving money on groceries. They are not showing any signs of really reducing, are they, food prices anytime soon. It's been a tough few years for those of us on a budget. I don't think it's likely to get any easier this year either. Grocery prices on some things I've noticed have fallen a little bit. So, for example, butter went through the roof at one point, and that seems to have come down. And the milk that I buy had gone up quite a lot. Dairy seemed to go up quite a lot, didn't it? And that seems to have come down a little bit, but not to where it was a few years ago. And the same with all other prices. Plus, we all know about shrinkflation, and that doesn't seem to get any better. I bought 2 packs of cat litter from Lidl, and I can't remember what they used to weigh, but I looked at them, I thought these are definitely smaller. They used to be like getting 2 lots of cat litter because it's so heavy. It used to be a bit of an issue, really, quite difficult to find a place for them in the trolley. But, I didn't have too many problems with it. So, I think even things like that are being affected. Everything has got smaller. And if it hasn't got smaller, it's got more expensive, or in the worst cases, both. So those sneaky manufacturers, I think they think we won't notice, and maybe at certain points we wouldn't have noticed, but it's happened so much now that we are all noticing it, aren't we? So it's just not like what can you do? Because if they're all doing it, you can't really avoid it, can you? So I guess you can do things differently, and maybe if you spend a lot on branded goods now and they've shrunk and gone up, then you could go and look at supermarket own brands so that you're trying to keep the costs down. But it's not like you can just buy a different product each time if they're all at it. So we've had to get even more creative to keep our grocery bills down, as I'm sure you have too. And I find what I do a lot of the time is I just buy differently, and I buy less of the things that I would have bought before that maybe are a bit expensive. So, for example, I used to buy salmon or some fish every week. I thought that was just part of my diet. That was what I considered part of my diet. Tried to eat fish at least once a week, but now I don't. I maybe buy it once a fortnight or even once a month. I haven't bought much salmon. It's just too expensive. We'll tend to eat cheaper meats like chicken, maybe mince of various sorts and that kind of thing. It's very, very rare for me to buy a joint of anything like beef or lamb or anything like that. It's just out of my price range, and it has been for a while, but it's even worse now. And I'm sure you've found the same thing, that maybe you've adapted the way that you're shopping now. So the fact that you're watching this probably suggests that you are really thinking about different ways that you can potentially save money on your groceries. So I seem to be moving my camera around. So anyway, I thought I'd go through a few ideas. So maybe you haven't thought of them all. Maybe you've thought of all of them. Maybe you can add to the ideas at the end of the video in the comments section. We'll see. So I've got quite a lot of ideas here. Let's go through them. So firstly, I think it's a good idea to know how much you're currently spending. So if you don't do a budget, then just do a budget. And you don't know how much it's realistic to budget for food for you and your family unless you know roughly what you spend. And I don't just mean that big shop at Sainsbury's or Aldi or wherever you go. I'm talking about all of the little trips to the shops, all of the treats that you buy, the lunches and those kind of things. Add them all up and include them all, because it may be that there are ways to kind of decrease the overall cost, taking those things into account as well. So I would say do 3 months worth. 3 months worth minimum, and you can just look at everything on your bank statement, even if you don't keep receipts. I used to keep all of my receipts, but you just don't really need to now, do you? Total them up, average them out, see what your weekly spend is on food, and do include takeaways as well, because that is part of your grocery budget ultimately. So if you're really, really needing to cut down, then you may need to cut down on those kind of luxury things as well. So add up all your trips to supermarkets, to convenience stores and everywhere. And it's also an interesting exercise because it shows where the money goes. And if you think overall, well, we only spend, as a family, maybe £100 a week on food. If you're a big family, you can easily spend that. But actually, you've always got a hole in your budget. Then you might find things that you spend regularly on, like little, maybe you go to a club with the kids and you always have a burger and that kind of thing afterwards, that you are forgetting to put into your budget. So it's worth doing from that point of view as well. So my next tip is to get really organised. It feels like a bit of hard work to be really organised about your grocery shopping and writing a shopping list and all those kind of things. But really, in the greater scheme of things, how long do you spend just watching telly or scrolling through your phone and that kind of thing? You can spend 20 minutes to half an hour really, really sorting out in your head what you've got, what you need to buy, planning your meals and that kind of thing. So get really, really organised. Before you go shopping, check all of the perishable food, particularly in your house and your fridge, and to an extent your freezer as well, and all of your cupboards. Find out everything that's there. Think about those things that need using quickly, and then make a meal plan. Incorporate those things first. I think it's really helpful if you've got a family to have an eat me first shelf and put everything on that shelf and say to the kids when they're looking for snacks, eat these first, and then things don't go to waste. Or you can incorporate them into your meal plan. And something else just to mention, if you've got teenagers or young adults in your house, or even older adults in your house with you, make sure they know what the meal plan is as well, so that they don't do what sometimes used to happen with my lot, is that you'd come to do sausages and mash for dinner, and the sausages had gone and somebody had decided they were going to have them for their Sunday morning hangover breakfast. So, just make sure they all know, so they don't eat key ingredients for your meal plan, because that tends to throw you off your plan. I do a weekly meal plan. I know some people do a fortnightly or even a monthly meal plan. It depends how organised you want to be, really. But it is worth doing it, and you can plan in to use any leftovers as well. So, for example, if you do a big stew and you think it's very, very likely you're going to have some left over, then that can be maybe a couple of lunches for the next day. And make that shopping list. I keep an ongoing shopping list. So I've got a blackboard up in the kitchen. Anything, as I think, we're getting to the end of that, I'll write it on the shopping list. So it's worth making a shopping list. And then once you've done your meal plan, obviously you can write down the extra things that you need. Don't forget to take your shopping list with you. I've actually got to the shops and thought, I haven't got my list, and hope there'd be someone at home so I can ask them to send me a photograph of my shopping list. These days I'm much, much better organised than that. Take it with you. If you're going straight after work, take your shopping list with you. And then try to stick to it as much as you can. And I do find this saves time in the supermarket. If you're just going for certain things and you just go for those, and you're not swayed by all of the clothing in your supermarket. I mean, Tesco's, I think, wow, it's like a village. It's got so much stuff in it. And just avoid those things. Avoid the aisles, the middle aisles in Lidl and Aldi, unless you specifically are on the lookout for something that might be in there. Just keep to your list. Unless you see something, maybe you see something yellow stickered, a different sort of meat, maybe you see lamb mince and you wanted pork mince and it's reduced and it's cheaper. So obviously get that and incorporate that. You can be a bit flexible, so it's worth doing that. As regards special offers, though, they can be useful if it's something you really want and it's really the cheapest way to buy it. But what I have found is you get those end-of-aisle bog-offs, we call them, don't we? Buy one, get one free. Sometimes they've got half price if you buy one, that kind of thing. Make sure they really are going to be cheaper. Look at the price per gram or per 100 grams or whatever, and see if it's actually really cheaper than just buying the supermarket own brand or a different brand. Sometimes, you're paying for the marketing for these big brand names. They look like a really great offer, and then when you do that comparison, they're not quite as good as they look. And also you need to be able to store them and use them by their best before or use by dates as well. And going back to food waste and not wasting food, you can actually save a lot of money by deliberately sourcing waste food. So if you haven't discovered or used the Olio app yet, it's really, really worth looking at. It gives you the opportunity to get food for free at the end of the day from various food retailers. That can be a supermarket, convenience store, restaurants, cafes, even places like Starbucks and Costa are popping up on there now. So it's really, really worth looking at. You do tend to have to go out fairly late in the evening, I find, so to pick up your bargains. And My area now doesn't have hardly anybody doing olio. We don't have a lot of shops, frankly, but there are still some, so I do keep an eye on the app. Where I used to live, I could have got free food every night if I'd wanted to, so it's really, really worth having it, especially if you're somewhere busy with lots of shops. It's also worth finding out if you've got any community fridges in your local vicinity, because they often are there to give away waste food as well. We've got one near my mum and dad, so I often pop into that and have a look when I'm on my way to my mum's house. And they're called community fridges, community pantries, community larders, those kind of things. They have different names, but they're basically the same thing. And they give away waste food, which is good. So, you know, you're stopping things going to landfill and reducing waste. Yellow stickers, obviously, they're always worth looking out for. I know when my local shops are likely to have good yellow stickers. So my local co-op, it'll always have them about 2:30, 3 o'clock on a Sunday. Sometimes they're really good. The one in my daughter's house is really, really good as well. And Monday mornings, oddly, I think they must bring some over from the Sunday evening. But you find out when your local stores do the best reductions. You could, don't be shy. Ask the staff. When do you start reducing on a Sunday? Or when do you start reducing? When's the best time to come in? When do you do your really big reductions? Because, of course, they tend to do a small reduction first, earlier in the day, try to get rid of stuff. And then they're really, really good reductions you'll find later on. And that's when you can buy ridiculous things for just so cheaply, like 20p and things like that. So really worth looking at that. And another app that you could consider is the Too Good To Go app. If you haven't tried that yet, that's also worth looking at, especially, again, if you've got a lot of shops and restaurants and that kind of thing in your area. My local co-op has cancelled my last 2 Good To Go bags. I bought them for £3.50 and they've cancelled them. So, I mean, that's kind of good. It means that they control their stock better and they don't have a lot of waste food, but it's a bit annoying when you've kind of geared yourself up to go at 2:30 and pick it up. My daughter's local co-op is a really big one and she has got so many Too Good To Go bags. Have been fantastic. And they're supposed to have, I think, a minimum of £12 for your £3.50 on that particular store. And she's easily got £25 worth. She's got things like chicken breasts, salads, yogurts, bread, pastries, just anything. She just really a big bag full. They're very, very generous with their Too Good To Go bags. I had a good one from the small Marks and Spencer's, which has got like a big petrol station and the shop is a Marks and Spencer's. I actually had a couple of good ones from there, but I had to go about 9 o'clock in the evening. Don't always want to go out 9 o'clock in the evening. And then you have to be able to eat the things or freeze them fairly quickly. Sometimes it's not really freezable stuff like sandwiches. Some sandwiches are, but egg mayonnaise and things like that are not. If you've got a big family, they're well worth looking at because, if you need to save time or do packed lunches, you get your sandwiches for just pennies, it's really, really worth it. And the other thing, I haven't done it for a while, but I used to buy from Approved Food quite a lot. And they were one of the first companies to come to the UK which sold food. It's not fresh food. It tends to be tins and jars and packets, but it's food near the end of its use by date or beyond the end of its use by date. But those things, perhaps they're not quite as good the longer you leave them, but they don't go off. So you can get all sorts of things. So this is particularly good if you're not someone that can scratch cook or has time to scratch cook and you like jars of sauces, for example, or if you've got kids and they like a bag of crisps in their lunch, you can get things like that. For me, it's too much kind of junky food, and so I don't tend to use it too much these days, but I have had some really good bargains from Approved Food. There are other similar companies, similar retailers around as well now. If you have a larger household, then buy large bulk packs of food. It makes sense. If you've got a big family of 6 or something, then buy the big sacks of potatoes and keep them somewhere dark. Big packs of onions, rice, pasta, coffee and tea and that kind of thing. It's cheaper. You get that economies of scale going on if you buy bigger packs. If you live by yourself or you're just a couple, then you're probably not going to want to do that with perishable items, but you can still do it with pasta and rice and that kind of thing because, they have a very long shelf date. So buy in bulk where you can. We're always being urged to eat seasonally, aren't we? Because it's better for the environment, because if you eat locally and seasonally, then the food doesn't have to travel so far. But generally speaking, buying seasonally, even in supermarkets, will be cheaper. So it's worth looking at what's in season wherever you live in the world at that period and seeing what's in season and buying as much as you can of it. I do find that certain things that are in season I would consider treat foods. I wouldn't buy too many of them. Like, for example, my favourite fruit, cherries, they have a very short season. I will buy them. I'll make a point of getting some cherries every year, but I won't buy them every week because they're expensive. Same with things like asparagus. I consider those luxury foods, but if you're going to eat them, certainly buying them seasonally makes a lot of sense, and they'll be fresher and much nicer as well. Tinned and frozen food is the cheapest way to buy produce, really. It was also cheaper for meat as well, I'd say, and fish. And it's really good. So again, if you can't buy bulk packs of things because you're a small family or just a single person, then buying frozen means less food waste generally because you only use what you need. And also tinned, I mean, I don't like tinned vegetables very much, but tinned fruit I quite like. And some tinned fruit and vegetables can be a much cheaper way of buying than buying fresh. Fresh can be quite expensive. So don't just discard and discount buying tinned or buying frozen. Sometimes it doesn't taste as good. Sometimes I think it tastes better. I buy peas, for example. I actually prefer frozen peas to fresh peas. Another thing that will help save you money on your groceries is just cooking yourself. And if you can't cook or say, I can't cook, I don't know how to do it, then you can cook. Seriously, anybody can cook. You can make it as complicated and fussy as you want, but it doesn't have to be. It can be really, really simple. It can be as simple as making an omelette and a salad. It doesn't have to be complicated. Anybody can do that. And then once you get a little bit of confidence, you can maybe make some tomato sauce for pasta or a bolognese. Those kind of things, they're really not complicated. They don't take a lot of time. They just involve you having a little bit of confidence in your own abilities and being organised and having the ingredients, allowing yourself the time. So don't just say, I can't cook, because anyone can cook, honestly. Most of us are pretty average cooks, but we get better with experience and just trying it. So once you've started making some things homemade, like, for example, pasta sauce, you probably won't want to go back to jars of pasta sauce. I mean, I think I have one jar of pasta sauce in my stores, and it's an absolute last resort. Making it myself, it's so easy with tinned tomatoes, some onions, some garlic, some herbs, maybe some chopped peppers if I have those as a basis for a tomato sauce, and then I can use that to, I don't know, turn into a bolognese or a chili or whatever, or a stew, whatever. Once you can do that, you can then start to experiment and use it as a base for something else. Those things taste so much nicer when they're homemade, and they're certainly healthier. They've got far fewer, well, no probably, preservatives and little salt and sugar and that kind of thing in them. So it's much, much healthier as well. If you have any space at all and just a little bit of time on your hands, consider growing some of your own food. It's really, really satisfying. And it does mean that you can grow those things that might be too expensive in the shops yourself for a fraction of the price. And that's what I tend to focus on if I'm going to grow anything at all. I love growing runner beans. They're so easy to grow and they taste delicious. And when you go into the supermarket, you get a little packet like this big. And it costs really a lot of money, and I think, well, I've got massive of those up my garden, so it's really, really nice. Short season again, so I mean, that's one of the things that eating seasonally, runner beans, unless you can buy them from the end of someone's garden, they don't seem to get very cheap. They just are there, and I think they're almost a luxury food these days. If you've got just a little bit of space, you can grow fresh herbs or new potatoes or things like, whatever you want. I mean, we've got tomatoes, peppers, we grew aubergines for the first time last year. Just things like that, whatever you fancy, whatever you like eating. Growing a little bit is quite nice. It gets you outdoors, gives you a bit of exercise, and you get fresh, organic food for a fraction of the price it would cost to buy it. Another tip, but also another necessity in our house, is to eat less meat and fish. I've already mentioned that we're not eating salmon and other fish as often as we used to. But meat generally, meat's expensive compared to things like pulses and dairy. So I know dairy's gone up, but it's still cheaper. You tend to use less of it, so it's cheaper to eat than meat. I think that veggie food can be really, really healthy. It can introduce a lot more fuel fibre a day. Another thing that I find saves me money, and particularly when I was working full time, was batch cooking. So again, I've mentioned things like sauces and curries and that kind of thing. If you can batch cook some of those, stick them in your freezer. A freezer, I think, as an aside, is a really worthwhile investment. But if you can make things like casseroles and curries and sauces and that kind of thing in bulk, you can take advantage of buying the bigger packs, which I mentioned already, and you can stop buying ready meals and convenience food and takeaways, because you'll already have something in your freezer that you can get out in the morning before you go to work, and it's there ready for you to eat when you get back. It's so easy. You'll really thank yourself for spending a bit of time, maybe a few hours on a Sunday, and then you've got like a month's worth of ready meals. Very, very worth considering. With energy prices being as high as they still are, then cooking differently is a good way to save money on food. So lots of us have done this already. For example, I air fry nearly everything. Very, very, very rarely use my oven these days because the air fryer is so much quicker and it's cheaper to run. But you might also have a slow cooker, or perhaps you've got an instant pot. Even just your microwave, anything that cooks really quickly or really slowly tends to be the way to go when you want to save money on your energy bill when you're cooking your food. And you might have seen I did a review of something called a Wonder Bag about a year or so ago. I'll try and remember to link it in the description below. And it's basically a big padded bag that acts as a slow cooker. So you can invest in one of those, or lots and lots of people in the comments said to me that they'd made their own with old duvets, eiderdown, straw boxes. It's the same kind of principle as a straw box. And the idea is that you bring things to the boil. So you might bring a casserole to the boil, and then you wrap it up in your insulating material or in your Wonder Bag, and it cooks itself over about 6 to 8 hours. And that will save you loads of money on your energy bills. If you and your family guzzle lots of juice, fruit juices, then A, stop, because it's really full of sugar. It's bad for your teeth and it's more sugar than you think, even though it's natural sugar. But also B, it's quite expensive if you're buying a lot of juice, because kids don't just have a small glass. They'll come and give themselves a huge glass of juice and guzzle it down in no time. So I used to, with mine when they were here, I don't drink juice much at all now, but I dilute it. So consider diluting it. You can easily do it by a third. I think 50% was a bit much, and they started to really notice it then. I do it now when I buy coconut milk, because I find coconut milk anyway gets too thick for me, and I don't like that kind of sense. It's kind of sludgy. So I'll dilute it and give it a really, really good shake, and that makes it last longer, and for me it tastes better. So you can do that with all sorts of things, or just stick to sugar-free squash. I don't think that's particularly healthy either, but if you've got kids and they want to guzzle something fruity, then that's probably a cheaper option. And while we're on the subject of drinking and drinks, I'd say drink more water from your tap, not bottled water. That's expensive and wasteful and creates a lot of plastic. But rather than drinking juice and tea and coffee or alcohol, drinking more water, it's healthy for you, it doesn't cost anything, and it's something I need to take my own advice on. I drink tea all day, although I do drink water too. I'm drinking water right now. So drink more water. Food allergies are a bit of a problem when you are on a budget and you're trying to reduce your grocery bill. It's actually really, really tricky. And I know from just my own experiments with eating gluten-free that buying ready-made gluten-free products was just ridiculously expensive. You know, a loaf of bread was crazy. So the only way I really found to save money on those kind of items would be just to make my own. So I just think it's actually impossible to have a nice gluten-free bread, to be honest, but you can make gluten-free flatbreads that aren't too awful. You can make keto rolls. If you look out for keto rolls, they happen to be gluten-free and they are quite good. I think they're actually quite reasonable, particularly if you have them warm. So making things from scratch when you've got to have a gluten-free diet, things like cookies and cakes as well, tends to be the only way really to get the cost down, I think. Lactose-free milk, luckily for me, because I drink lactose-free, I can have lactose, but not very much. You know, if I have too much, I get an upset stomach. So luckily for me, it's now available quite cheaply in supermarkets and particularly in Aldi and Lidl. I think it's £1.15 or £1.10 now. It's gone down again from what it was. So, but other products tend to still be branded and quite expensive. I did attempt to make some lactose-free yogurt with my lactose-free milk, and it wasn't successful. I used to make yogurt years ago. I had a yogurt maker, but I wasn't successful this time, so I don't know if there's something in the milk. So if anyone tells me if you've had any success with making yogurt from lactose-free milk in the comments. I'll be really, really interested to hear how you've done that. I guess the other thing you can do is make yogurt from coconut milk would be another option. But let me know what you've done. I'd be really interested to know, because at the moment I'm buying Greek strained yogurt, which I get from Aldi or Lidl. That's by far the cheapest place to buy it. But it would be great to make my own. So I'm currently eating low carb, and that's another diet, a special diet that will be expensive. It's just more expensive, whichever way you look at it. Again, I'm trying to keep the costs down by eating quite simply, by buying things that I can buy, again, in Aldi and Lidl, rather than going specially to other supermarkets and paying an arm and a leg, and by making some things myself. So, for example, I make my own kind of granola, which I sprinkle on my yogurt. It's just from seeds and things which I buy in bulk, and buying in bulk is kind of a crucial thing as well for eating low carb. I think, because the problem is that once you cut out those carb-filled foods that fill you up and that are cheap, like pasta and rice and bread, then it just automatically becomes more expensive. So I think this could be a video in the future in its own right, because I'm experimenting to see all of the ways that I can eat low carb on a tight budget. But generally speaking, I would say if you've got food intolerances, allergies, or you're eating some kind of special diet for a particular health reason, then you're going to pay more. So it really pays to look around, do some research, see what you can make yourself, see what you can buy things in bulk, that kind of thing. Unless you currently eat takeouts every single night, then those food subscription boxes like HelloFresh and Gusto and those kind of things are going to cost you more. I know that they are advertising HelloFresh by saying it saves money because I don't waste food and that kind of thing. And that's probably true. But as I say, unless you normally buy everything pre-made and pre-prepped and everything, then it's just not going to save you money. It's going to cost more, particularly if you've got a family. I do understand the appeal. If you're like, I don't know, maybe you're a young professional couple and you're earning a decent whack and you don't have to worry too much about your grocery bill, then I can totally see the appeal. But for those of us who are looking to reduce our grocery bill, it is expensive. It just means, it's nice to have that inspiration, isn't it? You think, oh, God, I'm going to make some exotic sounding curry or something with my HelloFresh box. But, you only have to do a little bit of looking around on recipe guides and online, and you can find some exciting recipes that you can make yourself, and some that don't take too long. And just spending 20 minutes, half an hour, as I say, just planning your meals and planning your shopping list and seeing what you've got and incorporating everything in will save you a lot more time than buying subscription boxes. I think another fairly obvious tip is not to buy pre-cut produce. So if you buy it pre-cut, it's more expensive. You're paying someone else to cut it for you, you're paying for the packaging, and I find it just doesn't keep as well. If you don't want to chop things up yourself, or maybe you've got arthritis in your hands or you've got disability or something like that, then frozen is probably a better option, because obviously it comes pre-cut. So I would say do that instead. Same with, to an extent, chopped up meat. If you get a chicken breast and it's chopped up already, you'll pay a lot more. If you look at price per kilogram, it's just really not worth it. Just chop it up yourself if you possibly can. And my last tip, I haven't been counting them as I've gone along, but I think there are 18 tips altogether, is to shop less often. I find that if I do a lot of small trips to, tends to be then my local supermarket, which is a small co-op, I will spend a lot more money, not just because it's more expensive, but because there's a lot more temptation each time I go in. So if I go in a lot, I mean, how often do we go into a shop and come out with exactly the one thing that we went in for? You'll come out with more than you had planned. I'm sure I do anyway. Unless you've really, really got a will of steel, then you might find that's the case. So I find shopping less often saves me money. We don't do a monthly shop, but we do quite often do a fortnightly shop, and then just do a very small shop of anything fresh that we've run out of in between, just to top up. And then I don't get tempted, and I spend less money and stick to my budget. So the main thing is with all of this is when you're trying to save money on your groceries is to be realistic about what you'll actually eat. Don't just buy things because they're cheap that you don't actually like or your family aren't going to eat. It's a false economy if you end up throwing it away. And don't deprive yourself. So you need to build in some treats. So if you always have a weekly pizza night or something, think about, could you make the pizza or could you buy it in? You can still get the really nice pizzas from the supermarkets. So could you buy in a really nice pizza if you don't want to make it or don't think you can do as good a job? You can still make it an occasion, can't you? And you could get some nice drinks in and a salad and a nice dessert and that kind of thing. So you're just taking it down a little bit and in terms of how much it's going to cost you rather than getting rid of it altogether. So make sure you leave room for treats. Buy yourself the odd bottle of wine. Buy the kids sweets. Let them have crisps if they want to occasionally. I mean, I think that being deprived is it's miserable. So, you want to feel that you're enjoying the food that you are making, the food that you're eating. You can still have the odd treat. So if you need a takeaway, build it into your budget. If it's a weekly one and you can afford it, fine. Otherwise, maybe make it a monthly one. We probably do a takeaway once every couple of months. And it's something that our budget can cope with, and occasionally, if we've been spending the day decorating or something, the last thing you want to do when you've been spending the day up a ladder with a paintbrush is to start cooking from scratch. But this is where your batch cooking could come in handy. And the other night we did that. We didn't get takeaway actually, but we had oven chips and an omelette and some peas, and it was really quick. So, plan those kind of things in. So it's just being realistic, being really organised. Planning is absolutely key. I find that especially for me at the moment because, as I said before, I'm eating low carb, and if I'm going to keep within a budget, which is an increased budget, I have to say, but if I'm going to keep within that budget, I have to plan. I have to plan my meals, I have to cook everything, and I have to make things like my snacks. I make some keto crackers and things like that because they're much, much cheaper than buying things, and it helps me to stick to my diet, which makes me feel a lot better. So anyway, if you've got any good tips that I haven't mentioned for reducing your grocery bill, keeping your food costs low, please do mention them in the comments below. I always read them. I love reading what you have to say about any issue, but particularly this one. Okay, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and do subscribe so you know next time I am about to publish a video. I will see you next time. Bye for now.